I'm Alice Thorneycroft, and this is Brilliant Minds in Conversation, the podcast series where we untap the insights and stories of individuals who've performed at the very top of their careers. And I am so thrilled to welcome our guest today, former Royal Air Force fast jet pilot Mandy Hickson. Hi, Mandy.
Hello, Alice.
Now, Mandy is a true trailblazer, being one of only 5 women ever to fly the multi-million-pound Tornado GR4 jet. And during her time on the front line, she completed 45 combat missions over Iraq across 3 tours of duty. Since leaving the RAF, Mandy has become a highly sought-after keynote motivational speaker in the business and educational sectors, and she's spoken to over 100,000 school children as well globally, inspiring youngsters to strive for their dreams, asserting that you cannot be what you cannot see. And still drawn to challenge today and adventure, Mandy has climbed Mount Kilimanjaro and trekked to Everest Base Camp. And today, ladies and gentlemen, she's hiked all the way to the offices of Harvey Thorneycroft Ltd to share her wonderful insights. Welcome, Mandy.
Hey, drum roll.
Drum roll, drum roll. Mandy, it's a huge pleasure to have you here. And I should just disclose, ladies and gentlemen, that I've known Mandy since university. So it's extra special for me to have her sitting opposite me in the podcast seat. Mandy, I want to start with this subject of storytelling, which sits right at the heart of what you do currently. So tell me, where did you craft your storytelling skills?
Well, I think as a child, what can I say? So I clearly remember holding court at home. So we lived in a very small house in Manchester, and they had this breakfast bar in the kitchen, and I would come back from school and tell all the stories. And there was this one occasion, I think it was after my English GCSE, and I was regaling the story to my mum and my sister, and I was sat in the middle, about the essay that I had written in my English exam. And I got so emotional telling the story that I ended up crying at my amazing storytelling. My mum and my sister ended up roaring with laughter at my hilarity of how basically emotional I was being. And they went, "Did you actually cry in the exam while you were writing the story?" I was like, yeah, I did, actually. That's how good it was. So, yeah, and I would often get up and I'd perform. They would be my audience. And so I think that sort of obviously gave me this lovely stepping stone to go into storytelling later in life.
And you've kind of, you're so naturally humorous.
Thank you.
I know. I mean, it is actually a bit of a gift, but I see the impact that has on audiences. So how does humour work with you in terms of your storytelling?
I think it's really, really important. And if you ask any successful speakers, what they will try to do is inject some humour into that session right at the start. Because what I see is, if you can say something that's maybe a little bit risque and maybe not what the audience are expecting you to say, and you can say that right at the very start of your speech, firstly, it catches them off guard because it wasn't what they were expecting, but then they laugh. And then you literally watch the audience go, this is going to be great. And you can see the whole body language of the audience change in front of your eyes after that first joke, you know. And it's not a joke, it's just part of your story, but it just comes across so naturally. And, you know, even at an event I was speaking at last night, I literally saw them all go, oh my gosh, this is going to be brilliant. And it's great to be able to do that.
What have you ever been in a situation where that hasn't happened from that opening line? Because I think the thing with humour is it can be really difficult if nobody then laughs at what you think is funny.
No, because I'm actually very, very funny.
Okay.
So I've never actually had that. No, I tell you what, there is one bit which I always have to remember if I'm speaking to a multinational audience. I'd make a comment, a reference to, he took me down to the bike sheds. Now that is a very British humour, the sort of this analogy of behind the bike sheds. Everyone in a British audience ends up laughing, and you can see a foreign audience going, what? Why is that even funny? I don't get that. And so I do always have to remember that if I'm overseas doing a speech, not to put that one in.
Well, let me just pick you up on the bike shed story, because that was quite a significant part of your career. Take me back to that bike shed moment.
It sounds really dodgy when you say it like that, doesn't it? I was going through fast jet training, and I was right at the very end, 3 trips from graduating, and I failed a flight. And it was quite a complex flight that we were doing. It was called Battle Turns. It was where we were putting everything that we had learnt from close formation, navigation skills, low-level flying, hitting targets within 5 seconds. And you're travelling at speeds of between 420 and 500 miles an hour. So at only 250 feet above the ground. So that's height of a pylon. You're travelling with a wingman, so you're in formation, and you've got an enemy airborne, an instructor, who's trying to get behind you to simulate shooting you down with a missile, basically. And you've got a blind spot, it's behind you. And so that's really the job of the wingman, is to check your 6 and in fact 360 around you. And basically when you go to turn, you can't just turn left, because then you're behind each other and you're vulnerable and you're basically exposed and will be shot down. And so you have to coordinate your turns. And this is what I was failing. I was basically so caught up in the minutiae and the numbers of this. I had completely stopped seeing the bigger picture. And I was doing it sort of dogmatically, looking almost inside the cockpit, which is a really dangerous thing to do when you're flying just above the ground. Now, this is what I was failing, and I'd go back to my room every night and I was really stressed. I mean, I wasn't eating and I wasn't sleeping. I had a skin rash covering my whole body. The doctor,
attractive.
It was a very attractive look at that time. And the doctor said, "Have you changed your washing powder?" And I was like, that is how little we talked about mental health. I mean, I never heard the word stress mentioned in 17 years of service. It's like, what? So it's crazy, but we all did the worst thing we could do, which is terrible, because it does have quite big implications as you look down the line of people isolating themselves. And there was a knock on my door. It's my course mate, Puppy. Terrible course signs, what can I say? He's still called Puppy now, and now he's head of training for the entire Air Force. And everyone goes, "Puppy!" And he said, "Mandy, we're taking you out this evening." I was like, "I think not. You've been drinking and you celebrated the fact you finished." And he said, no, trust me. And he took me down to the bike sheds. Hence the da-da moment. And we got on our bikes and we went off to this parade square, and all the guys were there, and we basically spent the next few hours just cycling up and down, yelling 30 stop at 60 port, and practicing everything I was failing in the air on the ground. It was really different. And, you know, I often think we focus on the wrong areas when we talk about like diversity, because we always focus on culture and gender, don't we? But to me, it's about cognitive diversity. It's about having people in our teams who think a bit differently, thinking outside the box. And I know that my husband and I, we think really differently. And I think the most successful teams, and I know that yourself as well, and Harvey, you know, you've got very different perspectives of how you see things, but actually you come to much better conclusions because you're getting that different schools of thoughts that come in. And they gave me that. I flew the trip the next day, passed it. And at the end, when my instructor got out and he descended the steps, and firstly, he kissed the floor, which was not boding well at that moment, because I just thought, oh my gosh, he's relieved I've not killed him. He's celebrating life. And then he sort of shook his head and went, "What was this? What was that performance?" And he said that was like flying with a different pilot. But the lovely story is that I hadn't known it, but the rest of my course did, was that we were actually in competition to some degree, because there were only minimal spaces to fly those courses on the frontline squadrons. And those courses were starting in about a month's time. And by getting me through, one of them jeopardised their own career advancement by about a year. And so it's this lovely sort of story of selflessness and building trust, and something that the military do incredibly well is that camaraderie piece that so often we see lacking in businesses.
You said in that explanation that it's quite dangerous to just see it from the cockpit point of view. Yeah. What do you mean by that? Tell me a bit more.
Well, we talk about this thing called situational awareness, and when I say to people, what does it mean? They go, "It's awareness of your situation." I'm like, no, okay. But it's basically seeing the bigger picture. So if you can think, and so often we'll see this in the way that people work. They can't see anything further than what's happening straight in front of them. So if you're constantly looking at, my next event is, you know, it's all inside the cockpit. There's a bigger world out there, this bigger picture that's changing very, very rapidly. And so your ability to assimilate that change is going to be indicative of really how well you're going to perform. And we would often say the real problem when you're flying is that you end up water skiing behind the aircraft. So it's travelling at this speed, but your brain is travelling behind it. And so you're just feeling like you're reacting almost a second behind everything else. Yeah. And I think we do see that outside as well, don't we? Where just things are happening and we think, oh my gosh. So what we try to do to get ahead of the aeroplane is we plan. And you plan absolutely everything. But you're also building up competencies. And this is why you are trained way harder than hopefully you're ever going to have to fight for real. Because if you've put people through their paces in a non-conflict environment, a training environment, but you're training them really, really hard, when you actually go to war, it's going to seem easier, which is a crazy sort of concept, because then people are actually shooting at you to kill you. And so, yeah, it's about this understanding, and we will use an acronym actually called NUTTER: notice it, understand, and think ahead. So there's 3 levels of situational awareness. And when people are getting very stressed, you would assume that they lose the ability to strategize, to think ahead. But that's actually not what happens. Human nature dictates, and this human limitation that we have is that the shutters go down and we get tunnel vision. We see it all the time, don't we? And we have this thing where we keep on doing it the same way, same day. And we're almost like on that treadwheel. But actually what we are losing when we lose situational awareness is the notice level. If you're not noticing something, you certainly can't understand the implications of it, and then you can't strategize. So it's about giving ourselves the capacity to actually notice what's going on. So if I were to say to you as an aircraft, you're flying along, let's imagine a commercial one, and you've got a captain and a first officer, and there's an emergency, who takes over control of that aircraft? Who do you think?
What, in an emergency? The captain?
No, absolutely not. The normal situation would be that the first officer would take over and the captain would almost motor their seat back so they can see the bigger picture. And this works all the time. I was speaking to an event actually with an oil and gas company, in fact, oil and gas and chemical plant. And I was telling them about situational awareness, and we did an entire session actually using it and linking it into a medical emergency. And it was a night shift and there were 16 people in their full PPE, you know, their boiler suits with orange bibs going, what the hell are you going to teach us? You know, and I was like, this is going to be a joyful evening. I'd already done a morning and the day shift, you know, the afternoon shift and the morning shift. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be exhausting. Anyway, I told them this about this motoring the back and understanding this bigger picture. And then 2 years later, a supervisor from that night shift got in touch with me and emailed me and said, we had a major incident on the plant last night and I wanted to tell you. I ran in, I was about to immerse myself and I remembered about motoring my seat backwards. And I did. I took a step back and I spotted something that I wouldn't have spotted. And that stopped this incident from escalating into a full-blown emergency. Well, I obviously burst into tears because, as you know, I'm highly emotional. But actually, that's what it's about, isn't it? It's about having these tiny little segments or slivers of a different world that you can apply into your own environment.
But I think there's a couple of things at play there for me. One is around discipline, because at that moment in time, instinctively you want to go forward. In,
yeah.
But having the discipline to know that actually reeling your seat backwards is what you need to do. Yeah. But I think in the military, what I, from an outside perspective, see is the amount of rehearsal and practice and training. So that doesn't become a decision at that point. That becomes automatic.
Absolutely. And this is it. So we train so much so that we are not reacting to things. We're giving a measured response. And there's a gulf between those two things. And that, if you think about the complexities of modern aircraft, you know, they are incredibly intricate systems with so much redundancy. This isn't like stick and rudder skills anymore. These things are fly-by-wire, they're Gen 5. You know, these are complex aircraft. We can't train for everything that's going to happen. So now we have completely changed our training to go away from training for scenario to competency-based training. And it's a really different way of training, and it's applicable to every business because, you know, we are in a very agile world whereby different scenarios are going to keep on coming up. And if we've only trained for this very narrow area, we're going to miss what's going on over here. So if we can build competencies around how we communicate, how do we use assertion versus aggression? How do we have difficult conversations? All the things that you do actually within your coaching as well, Alice, is that it's not always a great place just to agree with each other. I want people who are going to challenge healthy conflict. And that's really important, to learn the skills to do that in an assertive way, but that is not going to bring in the emotion of it.
So rather than sort of limiting your preparation to thinking just about scenarios, you're actually saying, let's get some competencies that we can apply to any scenario
absolutely.
And work on those. Did you pass your driving test first time?
No, I didn't. Thank you for that. It was very upsetting. No, I didn't. As it happened, I was furious because there was a girl in my class who was a rubbish driver and she passed first time. So I was really, really indignant.
Were you flying before you could drive?
Yes, I was actually. So I had got my private pilot's license already. So I got a flying scholarship actually at the age of 17 and I'd done my licenses.
That's bonkers.
Yeah, it is bonkers. It is bonkers then, because when my children were that age, I thought, oh my gosh, the thought of trusting you with an aeroplane at this age.
Yeah.
It's like, like, what a huge leap of faith for like your parents and stuff to say, yeah, I'm sure you'll be fine. And in fact, my first ever flight, once I gained my PPL, my private pilot's license, I got it on the 40 hours. That's what you needed, 40 hours on the dot. And I got mine exactly on 40 hours. I took my parents up and my boyfriend at the time, and they're all over 6 foot, because I'm not petite myself. And she says in the nicest possible way, hence the call sign Big Bird. But basically, I took them all flying from Blackpool Airport, and I'll never forget this. As I was taxiing in, so I've got my stepfather, who was 6'3", my mum's 6'1", and my boyfriend, who was 6'2" or something, all quite heavy. And as we were taxiing out, I'd never flown with passengers on board the aeroplane. And they said, would you like to backtrack? And I was like, and backtrack, if you can imagine, you've got this big runway and you say don't always taxi on right at the very end of it. So they'll say, would you like to backtrack and use all the available runway? Well, I'd never had to before. And I was like, no, I'll be fine. And we took off. Started powering, this is going a bit slower than normal.
Like the Flintstones, when you all have to pedal.
They're all going running. I go, get your feet down. Come on, run quicker, run quicker. Anyway, as we took off, the stall warner started going off, which is going, do, 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 do. My mum's going, is that normal? I'm going, completely normal, mum, completely normal. There's a pontins, much like a Butlins, at the end of the runway, and our wheels nearly grazed the top of the pontins. You can imagine you'd be lying in the pontins pool with the red coats around going, crikey, that's a low-flying aircraft. Oh, it was hilariously funny. Well, it was, because I got away with it.
Just about.
I mean, the rubber, roof, or the rubber tyre marks on the roof obviously might not quite dictate that I got away with it.
Oh, amazing. So tell me, your mum's a really big believer in you from an early age, wasn't she? Tell me a little bit about her influence on you and how you ended up being a pilot.
Yeah, so my mum and dad actually divorced when I was about 2. So in these days, it wasn't like divorce was a normal thing either. So I was the only one in my class who had divorced parents. So it was really unusual. And my mum was an incredible role model. So we had this we always got really old cars. And I mean, one was a Hillman Minx, and it would break down on every single jet. It had some rust on the floor. And mum would just say, avoid sitting with your feet over that area, girls, because you could see the road through the bottom of the car as we were driving along. And we would tow this caravan and we'd break down on every single journey. I mean, we had more holidays with the AA than actually, and we would be, when are we getting them, mummy? And she'd be like, who knows, darling? So, at one point we were camping in a farmer's field, and he had to literally pull us up a hill. And there was a drought, and it was a heat wave that year, and we couldn't get anywhere. And all he gave us was one bottle of water. We were there for 3 days. This is pre-mobile phones. Anyway, I digress. So mum was this incredibly strong role model. And, the fact that she would tow a caravan off with these 2 little girls says a lot about her. And, she always was this believer that if it's going to be someone, why shouldn't it be you? And I sort of loved that, because it sort of takes the pressure off you a bit. If someone's saying, be the best you can be, that's all great. And we all want to be the best we can be. But if it's going to be someone, why shouldn't it be you? It sort of says, you know what, do everything that you can in the background, Mandy. But you are positioning yourself in a really good slot so that, if they did change the rules, because when I wanted to be a pilot, women weren't allowed to be pilots in the Air Force. So I'd sort of chosen this impossible career dream that didn't exist. But her view was this, chip away at it, just chip away. And, when I look back now, when I grow up, I still want to be like my mum. In fact, I was writing that in the acknowledgements, and I made myself cry. Flashback to my English GCSE. Oh dear. But my sister went on to be a palliative care consultant, medical director of a hospice. So my mum obviously did something quite right.
Yeah, you're making me think of my mum now.
Yeah, don't cry as well, Alice.
We're not going to turn this into a big crying fest.
No.
Your biggest opportunities often show up dressed as problems. Tell me about how you nearly didn't get into the Air Force.
Yeah, there were a few different things, actually. The one, though, that was almost like a real stopping stone was when they changed the rules. So if you think I'd taken a really amazing route by now, I'd got this flying scholarship, I've got my private pilot's license, I go off to the best university in the world, met some incredible people, Alice, at Birmingham. I joined the University Air Squadron, which is a club run by the Royal Air Force.
It's very cheap.
very
shots
cheap beer and
yeah.
very cheap shots.
Yeah,
We couldn't
remember
believe
that.
it. Many a party. What can I say? Share it with your friends. That's all.
That's the only reason I was friends with you.
Yeah, I
I'm
know.
just putting it out
To be
there.
honest, I bribed a lot of people with friendships with basically cheap shots. So anyway, so I was on the university. I gained 160 hours of flying. Not the best degree as a consequence of that, but hey ho. And in my second year at uni, they changed the rules, allowing women to become pilots. And now I'm in this perfect sweet spot of being in the right place at the right time. Finally, the stars align. I apply and I fail all the tests to be a pilot. And they're all computer-based aptitude tests. You're allowed to take them twice only. I went back, did them my second time, and I failed them all again. And that's where it really would have been the end of the line. But this is where I look back and I just think there are going to be pivotal people in your life that if they hadn't been there at that moment, you would not have had the career path you've had. Obviously, your parents can be one of those. But one of them was the boss of this club. He was a middle manager, squadron leader, not very high ranking, but he was running this air squadron. And he didn't look at the test results and say, Mandy's failed, therefore Mandy's no good. He said, Mandy's failed, but what's wrong with the tests? Because she's actually one of our better performing pilots. And he challenged the Air Force system. And he basically asked them to investigate. And they found out that about 70% of women were failing these tests outright compared to about 70% of men that were passing them. So he's uncovered an unconscious bias that was existing at the outset of recruitment that they'd been unaware of because they'd never been tested or designed with women in mind. And the Air Force offered me, as a consequence of that, and I remember I was sitting in his office and I got this letter. He said, Mandy, we've had a letter for you. I opened it and it said, we'd like to offer you a commission as an air traffic controller. I was like, I don't want to do that. I burst into tears again. I'm sort of getting a theme going on here. Very, very emotional, basically. What can I say? And he said, well, I would advise you to take that. And I was like, why? I don't want to be an air traffic controller. Why can't they even take me on as a navigator, which meant I was still flying? And he said, because then it's a foot in the door. Once you're in, Mandy, we can make your case. Because now, if you think about it, they're taking you on for who you are. And one of the big things about the military is that you sign up to serve, it was Queen and Country or King and Country, because you're passionate about that. And then the career choice that you do within that has got to be secondary to that. And that is actually true, because by then I did want to serve. And I definitely wanted to, that camaraderie. I love the leadership, the teamwork. And so I thought, right, on his guidance, I took that. And he said, I'm going to keep on making your case. But if you think about this, was going to be a massive leap of faith at this point, because I'm now signing up to serve until my 38th birthday in a career I have no desire to follow. And I joined, and once I was in, I wrote lots of letters, as he did as well. It's like an email, just slower. And eventually I think I bored them. I bored them because they got so many letters from me, and they were like, just give her the branch change. And I got this letter, and it said, Dear Flying Officer Wells, the RAF will give you a branch change to pilot. And then it said, we are, however, taking you on as a test case to see how far through the flying training someone with no aptitude can get before they fail.
Have you still got that letter?
I cannot find it anywhere
I'd
in all the
love to
moves.
see that.
I know what, it's so devastating.
But you remember the words?
I remember the words
Yeah.
really clearly. I thought, and I mean, I'm going to ask you, Alice, what do you think that letter did to me? Because you know me.
I know exactly what that did to you. We went, okay, I'm going to show you.
Absolutely not. Of course it did not. I mean, what a ridiculous comment. I'm a 21-year-old girl and I'm being told.
You probably burst into tears.
I think I burst into tears. I was, so relieved that I'd done it. I couldn't believe I'd got the opportunity because I'd always had this belief I would do it. And you know that as well from my time at uni. I always told people I was going to become a pilot. Yeah. And even when I was taken on as an air traffic controller, I remember in officer training saying to people, they say, what branch are you? And I go, well, I'm air traffic, but I'm just waiting to become a pilot. And I will. And they were like, yeah, right. And then, of course, I did. But they said in this letter how far you get before you fail. And what it did to me was take what was then a very, very confident young lady, not in a egotistical way, but I always had this innate natural confidence.
Yes.
And they
I call
planted
it good conceit of yourself.
Oh, I love that.
That's borrowed from Frank Dick. I'm not going to claim it as my own.
We love you for that.
We
love Frank for that. And I'm going to use that. Thank you. Steal it and claim it to be my own. Not a mention of Frank in the past. Okay. So until he sees me and then sues me. But basically, I love that. So that's exactly what it was. But they planted this seed of doubt. How far you get before you fail. We would now call that imposter syndrome. Because, of course, the backtrack now is that every time you fail, and this is the most intense flying training courses, pretty much up there anywhere in the world, every time you fail, in the back of your mind, all you're going to say is, well, is this as far as I get? Because they're waiting for it to happen. You don't, in a business, set a strategy and say, our goal is to reach this. By the way, you're never going to get there. No one's coming on the journey with you. You're not going to say, I'm going to run a marathon and not even do Couch to 5K. You're going to have a plan, a strategy and goals. And that's what was taken away in some way.
I want to talk to you about the miscarriage you suffered when you were the only female aircrew in your squadron.
Yeah.
This is a difficult subject, but one I think we need to talk about because there will be people listening who will have been through this. But you were in a very male-dominated environment. How did you cope with that, and what impact did it have?
Yeah, so it was really brutal, actually. So I don't think at the time I gave myself time to actually process what was going on. So I'd been trying to get pregnant for about a year, but looking back, with hindsight, I realised that there was probably very little opportunity in that period for the stars to have aligned. Let's just say I was away on detachments, flying in Iraq. My husband was in the Navy. And so actually we weren't probably together at the right times. But I've been trying for about a year. My sister had just got pregnant. It was all very exciting. She knew that I was trying, and it was sort of quite a shock that she'd got pregnant so quickly. And so it was even sort of more upsetting. Anyway, I remember finding out I was pregnant, and I'd been flying for quite a lot of time by then, not knowing I was pregnant. And if you think when you're flying in a fast jet, you're wearing something called a G-suit, which constantly hits you in the stomach as it inflates to compress your lower limbs and stop the blood from pooling in your feet. So basically, as soon as you roll in and pull G, boom, you get hit in the stomach. And what happens is, as it hits you in the stomach, you tense up, and therefore you keep the blood in your upper body, and it stops you from passing out.
Into your brain.
Into your brain,
basically.
Yeah. And then you can do things like anti-G straining manoeuvres and things like that. But this gives you an additional about 2 G-force of tolerance from nothing. And I'd been being hit in the stomach constantly and flying all the time. And then I was organising the squadron's 90th birthday. So I was on the oldest fixed-wing squadron in the Air Force. So we were the first squadron to be hitting this milestone of 90 years. It was a huge celebration. As a junior pilot, I was put in charge of organising it as a small aside to my day job. So, I mean, to put it in context, we had a hangar party for 500 people with a hog roast and band. The following day, we had a full air show where we flew aircraft in from all over the world who would be displaying. That evening, we had a black tie dinner for 400 people seated in a dining room and a marquee at the back, of which I'd got a small aeroplane brought into the mess, into the dining room, and dismantled and then re-erected in there.
This
and
was all on the side of you doing your full-time job.
Full-time job.
Just a little
and then
extra.
On the Sunday, there was a jazz luncheon. So these were all the things I was organising, and we had almost every head of the Air Force, past and present, had happened to have been a member of 2 squadrons. So we had the most senior hot top table you could ever imagine. So I miscarried on the Friday. And I went into hospital and I was told that there was no baby and there was no heartbeat. And obviously I'm bleeding heavily, but I've got a job to do. And it was this moment where I thought, I was absolutely devastated. My mum was really emotional. She was going, Mandy, just lie down, stop it. I was like, Mum, it's happening. There's nothing I can do about it. And it was really awful. Yeah. And I just remember thinking, I'm going to have to just compartmentalise this and get through the weekend. And I basically did. I managed to carry on the whole weekend as if nothing had happened. I think I had a bit of drink actually by the Saturday night and may have had a few tears. Oh. Shock horror again. But what was really sort of sad as the backlash of this was when I'd found out I was pregnant, and it was only sort of almost about a week before this, and they'd grounded me because you can't fly. It was too late by then. I think the damage had been done. Then I lost my baby. And then basically I was no longer grounded because I was no longer pregnant. And so then they went, well, what do you want to do? Do you want to carry on flying? And I was like, well, yeah, it's crazy. I'm on the squadron. So I went straight back to frontline flying again. But meanwhile, there was a guy who was on my squadron and he had left and become my posting officer, i.e. he looks after my career. So he knew me really well, a guy called Wiggy, who then ended up being the head of the Air Force. good to have friends in high places, Alice. And so, but anyway, basically he said, Mandy, what job, and I said, well, look, it's sensible to move into a ground job. And there was a job at High Wycombe in Strike Command. It had to be a Tornado pilot that did the job. And it's known as a desk job. It's a really boring job. And basically, I didn't really want to do this one, but I was aware that if I did want to have children, this was all lined up for me to start in about 3 weeks' time. Okay. So did I go for it anyway? And it was this horrible feeling. I honestly felt like there was a noose around my neck because I had my last flight on the Tornado, and we had this amazing trip. We did air-to-air refuelling. We did, a big 4v2, which is 4 aircraft at low level, 2 aircraft attacking you, all around Scotland, landed in Lossiemouth, had some lunch, came back to land at Marham. It was an amazing flight. And at the end of it, they then take your kit off you and throw you in this horrible, disgusting water pit, by the edge of a hardened aircraft shelter. And it's all very funny. And then you have champagne, freezing cold, And anyway, and so I sort of got my last swan song of the flight. And then I turned up at High Wycombe on the Monday morning. And that was just like this noose. I just was like, I don't want to be here. Put me back in my comfort zone of fast jets, low level, G-force. I'm wearing my blue uniform with my starchy skirt and, static on my tights. And I'm there thinking, I'd hate to have got a ladder, Alice. Can you imagine? Sorry, I spotted as we were walking up that Alice had a ladder at the back of the tights.
I have a ladder in the back of my tights.
I just thought I'd point that out. Gifts, friends,
I know,
friends.
wonderful.
Yeah,
wonderful.
And I hated it. And this was it. And it was just horrible.
But you hadn't how did you dealt with the miscarriage?
Not very well.
No.
Not very well. No one to speak to at all. I literally stuck it in this box. And this is probably going off the scope of the podcast. Actually, bizarrely, it was years later, and I ended up bizarrely going to a medium for some other reason. And my daughter appeared.
Oh, no,
oh my God,
Mandy.
I was sobbing like a baby. But interestingly, a few of my family had been to see this same medium. And she had apparently been there for all of them, but she'd waited for me. And I'd always wanted a daughter. Nothing about that is wrong with me having my lovely 2 sons now, but I'd always wanted a daughter. And so, yeah, it was, and she's there and she said, oh, Mum's finally here. Oh my God, I could cry now.
Oh,
it was very emotional.
Yeah.
Anyway, I then handled it then and did a lot of crying, obviously. But yeah, no, it's amazing how you can do that. And so when I do see issues happening nowadays, I do think that, we have built up an awful lot of resilience. Perhaps I thought that world taught me resilience, and it's also held me in really good stead for doing what I do now. It's quite a tough world out there, in the world that we're in the speaking world, or getting gigs, or travelling, or doing whatever you're doing. And there's obviously going to be much like an actor or an actress, or going for jobs and not getting them. There's a rejection out there. Actually, who cares? Yeah. It goes off me like a duck, water off a duck's back nowadays. I don't get upset by very much, really.
Fabulous, I can tell.
Yeah, that's it.
What would actually, out of interest, on an aside, what would you have done if you hadn't done motivational speaking after your career in the?
Well, I trained to be an airline pilot.
So you would have. Would have done that.
If you think basically you don't earn a huge amount of money in the military, let's just put it out there. Let's be honest about that. So the majority of pilots on leaving know that this is the way that they're going to earn a really good salary, because you do get paid very well as a pilot in commercial sector. And so I did all my licenses to become a pilot. Took me about 18 months, about 6 flying exams and 14 ground school exams and about £20,000. And I'd held this license because I'd always dreamed about flying for Ryanair. Sorry, any provider is available. I'm joking. I'm delighted to fly for anyone.
And all our Irish friends out there.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, they're all wonderful airlines. Sorry, you're like, damn, now we can't show this. No, I'm joking. So my husband by then was flying for EasyJet, actually. And so, which is why I'm on brand for them. Actually, I'm speaking to them this afternoon. I hadn't even thought about that. Anyway, so I diverge. So anyway, I did all my licenses, but I'd never actually dreamed about being an airline pilot. And actually, because my husband had left the Navy, he was now flying for EasyJet. I just thought, how is this ever going to work? And that's when actually the stars align once again with wonderful conversations with great friends at dinner parties.
Well, that is very true. That is very true.
Alice and Harvey Thorneycroft enter stage right.
Well, that is how it happened.
It was how it
wasn't
happened.
Yes, that's bizarre.
It's like, why don't you tell the story?
Well, no, do you know, my favourite story is just after that. So we obviously had that conversation at in that evening at that dinner, and sort of planted the seed and said, why wouldn't you consider this? And you were like, I don't even know what that is.
I've never even been to a speech.
What do you mean? Is that a career?
Yeah.
And we had that conversation. But the story that stays with me and will stay with me till I die.
Oh, no, it's not.
Is when you came to our offices, all very professional, to talk about this new potential career. And so Mandy arrives
I'm going to go red.
In our office in Richmond, and she comes up the stairs and I'm like, hi Mandy, come into the meeting room. She said, hi, please don't look down. And I said, pardon? She said, please don't look at my feet. I was like, well, Mandy, now I'm going to look at your feet. And in your hurry to get out of your room in the dark at sort of 5 a.m. to drive up to London, you'd been ferreting around to find your shoes. You'd managed to grab a pair, or what you thought was a pair, which were in fact two odd shoes.
Yeah, very different
colour,
styles, different colours,
style.
Blue, brown, different boots.
Different heights.
Different heights. I mean, one was heeled, one was flat.
I mean...
And then I'd walked across Richmond Park going, and I looked down and went, oh my God. And I thought, I went to a shop, but I've got really big feet and I couldn't find any at the bottom of the high street. Oh my God, it was so funny. And I remember just you two laughing so much. But you gave me this wonderful opportunity then, actually. And I'll tell you something else that you did. You said, look, it's really important to go and see other speakers. And you took me along to see Alan Chambers.
That's right.
Who was an ex-Royal Marine and an Arctic explorer. And we went, and I remember saying to Alan at the end, how do I get into this, like really into it, Alan? I was hoping like for the names of agents that he could share and contacts. And he said, just be yourself. Yeah. And I actually thought that's really rubbish advice because I was hoping for other things. And I went away and I was processing it. And I thought, be yourself, because it's this realization that the brand is you. And actually, when people see you on a stage, and he said he saw people all the time acting like this, for example, on the stage, but then coming off the stage and being perhaps a bit of an arse, or not being a very nice person, or perhaps not being the person they are on the stage. She said, just be your authentic self. Mm-hmm. And it was really the best piece of advice, backed up with the things that you and Harvey were saying to me. And actually, it makes you realise that authenticity is got to be key, because that leads to trust and integrity of your own brand and who people are buying into.
And also you're not knackered.
And you're not exhausted because you're pretending to be someone you're not.
Absolutely, which is exhausting.
Yeah, it is exhausting.
The person you marry is the most important career decision you'll ever make. Tell me about Craig, your lovely husband.
My lovely husband, So Craig actually has been an incredible life partner. The best wingman anyone could ever ask for. So we met when I was right at the start of my RAF career. He was in the Navy, a pilot himself. And we've been together for over 30 years now, actually. And it was a really good job, actually, that I stuck with him, because I realised very early on that men didn't actually find fast jet pilots very attractive. Really? I tried it a couple of times. No, not in a dodgy way, but, on holiday and things, I'd be with all the men who were going, I'm a fast jet pilot, and I've never seen women literally fall over themselves. They're like fighting to get to these men. I said to somebody, I'm a fast jet pilot. I've never seen a man run so quickly in the opposite direction. It's just not an attractive thing. It's the wrong power dynamic. So I thought, best I stick with him. He quite likes me. So anyway, no, we've been together for 30 years and he's unbelievable. He's very, very different to me. So I would say that we are opposite sort of sides of it. So I know this is going to shock you, I'm an extrovert.
Are you, Mandy?
Alice? Yeah. Oh. He is what we would describe as a confident introvert. So, and he has his moments of flamboyance, of course we all do, but ultimately his default setting is actually very reflective, quite quiet, absolutely opposite from me. He's a planner. He won't make any move until he's got a plan in place, but he's then done the preparation for it. So he's severely dyslexic. And probably has ADHD as well, which we probably have only really realised when my older son was diagnosed with ADHD recently. But also, it was only when Jack, my older son, came out of school going, I can't read, Daddy, that he went, well, neither can I. And it was only then that Craig realised that the whole of his life he had thought he was thick and stupid, because he went to a boarding school as a young boy, and his school report, oh my goodness, we were writing this book together and he got his school report out. The headmaster's comments say, never has someone so thick basically come through the school. We will waste no pity on the fact that you will fail every subject. That's what it says in his school report from the headmaster. And they give a grading of where you are, not just in set C, but your number of where you're ranked within that. And every single one is set C, 24 out of 24. How demoralising. He just believed, and English lessons, they would laugh at him because he had to read out loud and he was getting all the words wrong and jumbled.
But I would always go and put my hand up for third messenger in Shakespeare, because it would be one line.
And you're now an actress and you have to learn scripts. So it's really funny, isn't it? So, you know, and he has gone on to achieve phenomenal things. But, you know, the difference between the two of us, he was going to do a powerboat licence and he got sent this brochure for the powerboat licence. And I might have been doing it too. I'll have been sent the same brochure and I would have perhaps looked at it as we're driving down to do the course, skimmed through it and gone, well, they're going to teach me. He, meanwhile, he'll have read it, the whole thing 6 times, so that he is not exposed for feeling stupid like that small boy. And so what he's gone on to achieve is phenomenal. He's probably one of the most qualified airline training captains probably in the world. You know, he's got so many qualifications. He's right at the top of his game. He was the sort of person that gives people their licenses to become a commercial pilot now. And he's done that through bloody hard work and determination. And so, yeah, I mean, interestingly, we've just written this book.
Yeah,
and
tell me about that, because that's your second book.
Yes, it is. So my first book was called An Officer, Not a Gentleman. Thank you very much, Richard Gere, for the inspiration. But I love that title because it just summed everything up. So we thought for this one, because Craig and I have written it together, we would call it An Officer and Her Gentleman. And it's basically part manifesto for life, part memoir. Craig's story has never been told. And it's basically done in the story arc of a flight. And it's been so exciting doing this with him, collaborating, and really sort of understanding bits that I hadn't ever heard about. There's 2 parts of his book that every time I read it, I cry.
Obviously.
Shock. I bet you do. I bet you do now.
Well,
Tell me if you do.
Tell
me if you
do.
do.
I will.
But it's this sort of feeling where suddenly he gets accepted into the Navy and he just says, it's the first time in my life I've ever succeeded at something. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you know, and he's 24 by then. And he's failed at every single thing he's done. And it's just quite sad, really. But he's gone on to achieve amazing things. And so it's taking 2 very different lenses, looking through a telescope from opposite ends, and looking at everything from imposter syndrome to fear of failure, talking about anecdotes from my second career, but also flashing back to my first. And then Craig's sort of story arc as well of him, amazing sort of stuff about decision making under pressure, dilemma. There's, you know, chapters called Your Captain Speaking, which is our slant on leadership, but not in a traditional sense of the word. And it's been great to put this book together with him, and I'm so excited. It's coming out soon.
Fabulous. Is there anything good, do you think, about getting old?
What, apart from this glasses on, glasses off?
Yeah.
Slight incontinence. Sorry, can you say that? Yes, wisdom. Absolutely. I would say I'm as happy now as I've ever been in my life. I have worked really hard to achieve what I've achieved, and I'm proud to say where I am now. But I feel that everyone always talks of work-life balance, and I think it's rubbish. I mean, there's a blend. I think life is always going to be a blend of that. It's not this tippy seesaw effect. It's about finding out where is the nice blend. And I think I've got to a point now, my children are a little bit older and much taller than me, and look down and tap me on the head and call me little mummy. But actually, that Craig and I are now enjoying our time, and I've got really good at becoming boundaried. And so I literally say, April, I'm not working. Right. Summer, I'm not working. I'm not going to even take calls. And I'm going to get those periods of time off, because do you know what? When I'm then back to work, I will work so hard, but it's for a finite period of time, and then I'll be off again. And so I think what I've got better at doing is saying no to things that I don't want to do. It's about having an opinion, but it's also about recognising your own worth. So before, I would always probably feel that I would just do things because I was so keen to impress or so delighted that somebody wanted me. And it's now recognising, actually, do you know what? If you are going to employ me, say, as a speaker or as a facilitator or as an MC, you're not just employing Mandy for that 1 hour. You're employing me because actually I've got 30 years of experience that I'm bringing into that one moment, and that you can be the catalyst for change for so many people. And I finally got to the point where I've hit contentment in that I'm proud to say where I'm up to, but I've taken loads of people on the journey with me. And that is something that I've really loved. And you and I have always, and Harvey have always worked so well and collaborated throughout the years. And it's about recognising, I think, when we have friendships, that we want those friends to succeed as well, not because, what's the word?
Isolation.
In isolation, absolutely. Yeah. And there's so many slices of pie, and we can take everyone on that journey.
And I suppose having Craig as your wingman, as it were, or, sitting next to you, he's a planner. So I should imagine he takes great delight planning that time out.
Oh, my word, yeah, absolutely. We've got a camper van now, and let's just say he knew the spec we were getting. I was going, I don't really care.
Yeah, just a camper van.
It's a camper van. Has it got a bed that moves down with a memory foam mattress? That's all that matters to me.
But you have actually been out, and have you got a name for your camper van?
Have we got? Oh yeah, Peggy.
Oh.
Well, the first one we had a caravan and it was called Pegasus. So she obviously was called Peggy. And so this one's Peggy 2. So obviously Peggy 2 is on the road again. Yeah, we always did. So I think it's a Casey Jones. Sorry, I digress again. Anyway.
There's one other thing I wanted to just ask you. Is I know you personally, I know you as a friend. I see the impact you have on audiences, especially women and girls. I mean, not just, but I can see there is something quite magical that happens in a room when you speak. But I wanted to explore with you how you see yourself. And I know when we talked, we had a little cup of tea in our kitchen just a bit earlier before we did this podcast, and we were talking about weight and how we see ourselves and our sort of self-esteem and how that's all linked together. Tell me a little bit more about that.
I think it's a really interesting one to unpick, actually, because I think when you stand on a stage and people are in the audience, they will see what they want to see. Incredibly confident, former fast jet pilot, on a pedestal perhaps. But the reality is that when I was 17 and I applied for a flying scholarship, so to put this in context, I was doing county sport. I was playing netball, hockey, tennis, at a really sort of decent level. And I was, very into my sports. I was very athletic. And so I was incredibly fit. So I was 6 foot tall and I weighed 12.5 stone at that stage. And when I went for that flying scholarship, I was told by the head surgeon, the head doctor, a guy called Wing Commander Diaper, that he would give me the flying scholarship, but only when I had remedied my obesity issue. He said that as I was 6 foot tall, the height charts for women for the Air Force only went up to 5'8". So he was going to come up with a number, and that number was 9.5 stone. So he said at 6 foot tall, you should be 9.5 stone. So you are 3 stone overweight. So until you have remedied this, you will not be given your scholarship. Now, this is how sad, when I look back and I reflect, I sort of think, why did none of us challenge that? Why did my parents not challenge it? Why did I? But in those days when hierarchy spoke and there was this sense of power speaking down, that we just believed them. So I therefore believed that I was obese. So I went back and I literally went to the gym every single day before school, every single day after school, and played sport in school. I ate nothing for breakfast, 2 Rivitas with cottage cheese for lunch, and for dinner I would have the same meal for 4 months. I had chicken with broccoli. That was all I ate. And I lost 3 stone. In fact, I lost, 2 3/4 stone. And I couldn't shift the last quarter. And they said, look, your 4 months is up. We need to give you the scholarship or not. Can you prove that you've lost the weight? So I went to my doctor. I walked in and she looked at me and went, oh my God, she thought I had an eating disorder.
Oh, Mandy.
And she said, Mandy, what on earth have you done? Because it was those days when you did have family doctors and they knew you.
Yeah.
She said, what on earth has happened? And I said, I was told by the Air Force. And she said, what? She was furious. She went, just give me the thing. I'll say that you've lost the 3 stone just so that you get the scholarship. I came out and I had 2 cream eggs and an elephant's foot cake. And basically the sugar hit my system and gave me diarrhea for 3 days. And I lost the 1/4 stone. And I was like, Why did I not do that earlier? For God's sake, if only I'd known. But anyway, what was interesting was what I think that did was plant this body dysmorphia on me, and it was ridiculous. I was with a friend 6 months ago, so this is how long it's sort of taken me. And we were walking a dog, and I was saying, yes, I'm on the fasting diet and I'm doing this. And she said, can I just say something to you, Mandy? You look bloody great. You're a menopausal woman at the age of 52. What are you talking about? Every time I see you, all you do is go on about your weight. And it was almost like she'd slapped me across the face. I thought, how did I not know that? How did I not know that I had become slowly obsessed? I weigh myself every single morning. I look in the mirror and I see someone fat. My husband tells me I'm gorgeous. My friends say you look great. But I'm constantly on a diet. And it's really sad. And it makes me sort of reflect on the messaging that we give to our young people in this world, this generation whereby social media is all around us, where all we see are thin people. And that is why I have loved the Rugby World Cup. It is a celebration of every shape and every size. And you know what, we went to the semi-final and I have never seen so many, let's say slightly larger young girls going, I'm playing rugby, because they are seeing you can't be what you can't see. And so it's like brilliant. We're celebrating diversity of size and shape and saying, you're a sportswoman and you have got a place on our team. And I just think this is the tidal wave that we have been needing. And if that is the catalyst that we need to change, to recognise that actually we are all different shapes and sizes. Let's just stop trying to be thin.
Absolutely.
And maybe I just need to finally get rid of that 17-year-old self to say, actually just be happy with who you are.
100%. I mean, goodness me, you would never know that.
No,
and that's
you wouldn't.
And this is the difficult thing. And I'm glad, and thank you for talking so candidly about it, because I think it really helps people to feel like they're not on their own if they're feeling like that.
Yeah, and I do think a lot of people feel like that, especially now we're in the Manjaro and the jabs, and I've got nothing against anyone doing that. I really haven't, genuinely. But basically, we're doing it because we believe that we should be thin. Yeah. And it is worrying.
It is worrying. Where do you get your inspiration from for speaking? Are there people you look to that inspire you as a speaker? Or do you just go out there and bump into people and happen to see them on stage? Or because as a speaker,
it's quite lonely.
It is, isn't it?
It was something that I hadn't really grasped, actually, and that's why actually I love working with groups like yourselves, because actually finally you're part of a team again. That's what I'd been missing, actually, and that's why I did Kilimanjaro, because it was sort of like I really missed the camaraderie and the team spirit. And I hadn't really realised how isolating it can be. And if you actually think about it, as speakers, you don't often meet other speakers.
No, that's what I mean.
Yeah,
it's really quite lonely, isn't it?
So I have had the opportunity recently to work with a group of speakers, and we've set up WhatsApp groups, and it's been really nice, actually, because it means, for example, if I can't do something, I can pass it to somebody else. And, you know, it can be really collaborative. And one thing that was really lovely for me was that when I left the Air Force, Jo Salter, who was the first female fast jet pilot in the Air Force, she's probably a couple of years older than me. And I'd never actually met her in the Air Force. But when I left, everyone sort of said to me, oh, you should speak to Jo. She does a bit of speaking. And so I got in touch with her. She was incredibly supportive. She gave me loads of advice and guidance. We have now become great friends, literally. And we have set up this flamboyance of pilots. We called it a flamboyance because every other name that was suggested to us was so rude I couldn't repeat it, quite frankly.
Sounds like a proper collective.
It is.
Noun.
5 of us, the flamboyance of pilots.
Fabulous.
And we finally met all 5 of us this summer, and it was so lovely. And what I realised was Jo guided me. 2 of the other girls that have recently left the Air Force, I've now guided them. And I've also guided someone else. And what's really lovely is this sort of lovely circle of mentoring and being mentee. And actually, I've realised now I've probably mentored about 6 or 7 speakers that get in touch. And you don't realise the wealth of knowledge that you've got. And I get them to present to me and I sort of go, and what's the point of that story? And they go, well, what do you mean? I'm going, well, you've just told me a story, but so what? And you realise that you've picked up this incredible wealth of knowledge that perhaps it was what you and Jane did to me when I first came to you and you went, it's a great story, but what's the so what? What's the audience going to take from that? And you realise that you've got that now in droves and you can share that. And it is not about taking the pie yourself, because there's so much to give, so many opportunities out there, and why wouldn't you share it? And it's been so lovely sort of taking loads of other people on that journey, and there's loads of people I still look up to, you know, and people I've met, you know, through working with you guys, working, you know, on the Brilliant Mind Showcase. You know, what a fabulous opportunity to meet people and connect with other speakers, to cry at Kevin's talk.
Didn't we all?
Didn't we all? Sobbing like babies, you know, embarrassing. Yeah, I've had a few of those. One of my first ever speeches, I was at the back and I listened to this woman doing a speech, and she'd been unfortunately paralysed in an accident, and it was so emotional. I forgot I was doing a speaker panel after her, and I was sitting properly crying at the back, and someone came to mic me up and said, "You're on the stage in 2 minutes." I was like, "What? Now? Look at me." It was the days before I realised that you could put mascara on that didn't run. I went with these black lines down my face. It was so embarrassing. Anyway.
Mandy, it's been an absolute delight talking to you. I could carry on. Well, actually, we could. We probably will actually when this all finishes. But thank you so much. It's a weird one for me to sit interviewing a friend because we have so many good chats off, as it were, off camera, off speaker. But I feel really fortunate that you were able to share some of those stories that perhaps you don't always share. But I, more importantly, know that the people listening will take something really meaningful from hearing those, because ultimately, I mean, you said it yourself, you know, you cannot be what you cannot see. And you are somebody that is very public now on that stage. And I hope that people have taken some things that perhaps they didn't know about you from listening to this. So on behalf of everybody who's been listening, a huge thank you to Mandy Hickson. And if you want more information about Mandy and her achievements, frankly, it's everywhere. But come to our website.
Go via
go
them.
via
Come
our
on.
website. But until next time, thank you very much and goodbye.